If you've been following us on our podcasts on Spotify, on LinkedIn or YouTube, you will know we've been on a bit of a journey. I call it the spice route because we've been exploring what it takes to negotiate across cultures. We've unpacked negotiations with Chinese, then French counterparts, and now we're bringing the next conversation to you right here in the UAE. And the timing, frankly, could not have been more deliberate or better. Confidence is returning, deals are moving again, and obviously we are seeing what Dubai is doing and what Dubai does best, turning any moments of uncertainty into what we call an opportunity to build. The UAE flag has never flown higher, and the business community here has never felt more a part of the UAE and is totally leaning in. So today we're getting into something every foreign business, every lawyer, every investor in this market really needs to understand. What does it actually take to negotiate successfully with an Emirati partner or with counterparts that are Emirati? There's no better person to have in this conversation than the guest we have today. Someone who's grown up here, someone who's spent his entire life and career here on both sides of the table. So we have Ahmad Lootah talking to us today, who's a law graduate from Sharjah University. He's been the cornerstone of his father's firm, or the firm that his father started called Hussein, Lootah and Associates since 2006. He's currently the firm's managing partner and advocate. He's built a great reputation in corporate and litigation practices at Hussein, Lootah and Associates. He's been shaping the firm's strategic direction, driving its growth. Ahmad has played a pivotal role in business development, forging collaborations with international law firms, and creating structures that actually enhance client services. He also conducts a lot of educational speeches and community workshops, bringing his knowledge and awareness and new laws and regulations in the UAE to the rest of us. He's very, very committed. He's very knowledgeable, and I'm so pleased to have him here talking to us. Ahmad and me get along really well. We, talk about the old days, the new days, the days, he's traveled around with his father. He works in financial crime, dispute resolutions. He has great and sharp judgment, and he is an exceptional leader and lawyer. So it's really great to have a conversation with him to get his insights, because sometimes when I'm having a coffee with Ahmad, I can't really talk about or push him on, Emirati negotiating tactics and other points. So I'm very much looking forward to dissecting, all of the bits and pieces, and talking to someone who runs such an established Emirati law firm and has so much knowledge about negotiating in the UAE on deals here and with the UAE courts. Today's podcast is also going to give us a really good insight into the UAE court system, which I talk so much about, and the civil law system and how that works and contrasts against the common law system. So enjoy this podcast, and of course, post us your comments and thoughts for future nationalities and deals that we should be talking about. Thank you so much for watching Think Tank. Thank you very much, Ahmad, for coming to our office today and for doing this podcast with me. As you know, we've been on a world tour and a big journey of negotiating topics. So we've done the Chinese, we've done the French, but today we have Ahmad here who has his own legal practice in the UAE. He's an Emirati lawyer, and we're going to pick his brain on negotiating tactics that we need to employ when we have Emirati businesses in front of us. So thank you very much for joining us.
Welcome. It's great to see you.
So you run one of Dubai's most established Emirati law firms. You spent a lot of your career in the courts. Can you tell us a little bit about your background to set the scene for our viewers and our listeners?
Well, fortunately, recently we are not spending a lot of time in the court physically, as you know. And that was great to have as a solution. We have all of that online kind of hearings, which was in place in 2020, which I don't know if people are aware about, which made our job much easier, to be honest.
People are always shocked, like when I do a lot of notary calls and things like that, and now the notary expanded to obviously doing calls with our overseas clients for attestations. They're always so surprised that the government is so digital, so online. And when we've done recent divorce hearings, we've had it all online. And luckily, we've not had to have the husband and the wife in the same room. So I think I'm all for online hearings.
But you can see how practical is it,
Absolutely. Yeah, but I mean, I guess you still spend a lot of time in terms of preparation because you have a shorter like bandwidth in terms of online.
Exactly. Yeah. I started in 2007, and before that, I was even involved in the business as the firm was established by my father.
Right.
So during my studies in the university, I was kind of fortunate to understand the dynamics of the business, be around somehow, train in the firm as well. So I had a long career within this practice, and I started in the dispute resolution and the litigation courts, attending hearings, etc. At the very beginning, managing the PROs, clerks. So I had the chance to understand the processes, not only the legal pleadings and the submissions, but also the admin work in the court at that time.
Right, which is really important, right? How to file, who you know.
Indeed. Yeah. But that sector changed a lot recently. With all of these online solutions, it's much more easier than it used to be. This is one of the changes we have seen positively, in fact, It was a hassle that time to move into different courts around the UAE. As you know, we are practicing in the federal courts.
Yeah.
So imagine having...
Can you tell us a little bit about the court system as well, just for our viewers, because most of them come from a system where there's one court.
Yeah.
And I always talk about the fact that, hey, we have access to so many different court systems in the UAE with obviously Abu Dhabi, Supreme Court, Court of Cassation, DIFC, ADGM. Can you tell us a little bit about the system?
I think we have a very unique system, considering we are not a big country. I don't think there's a lot of countries that offer that variation of options within this jurisdiction in the UAE. So on a federal level, we have 7 emirates, and each emirate do have its own court. Some of the courts are under the Ministry of Justice, which are considered federal, and some different emirates have their own local courts, like the Emirates of Dubai, Abu Dhabi recently, Sharjah had introduced this very recently, and Ras Al Khaimah. So those 4 emirates, they do have their own local courts. Other emirates apply the federal laws, and they are under the Ministry of Justice and from an admin perspective, but the laws are all the same. Besides that, we do have different specific jurisdictions. As you know, we have the DIFC, we have the ADGM, and I think all of that is to provide the maximum flexibility and options to the investors, which is very unique, I believe. So imagine being here, having the choice to have the local laws, the federal laws, or probably common law in some situations. So I think that's a very, very unique and competitive option of the UAE.
Yes, absolutely. I've really never seen that pan out the way it's panned out here, and precedents being applied, judgments being enforced from the local courts, and DIFC and vice versa. Yeah. Sorry, I digressed in my question.
It's okay.
So, for example, like what kind of matters do you end up spending your time on? Like, tell us about your typical day.
Well, from the beginning, going back to the practice, I started in the litigation and the dispute resolution, but I went more beyond afterwards to the management role somehow. And I think this gives you a wider perspective, because you run the business itself, the team, customer relationship, which is something most of the people underestimate. If you are a lawyer, it's a very important thing, because you're serving customers. Obviously, there is the technical part, the pleadings, everything is happening behind the scenes with the court. But then this customer is expecting to receive a certain level of service. And I think that was, let's say, the biggest contribution I tried to add into the firm since I was involved in the management specifically. So management, the customer relationship, and then obviously working in some certain cases, and usually they are dispute resolution.
Right.
Because that's let's say, our biggest practice
area.
your
bread and butter.
Yeah, the bread and butter, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's quite a good segue into our topic, which is negotiating.
Exactly.
So number 1, as the boss of the law firm, literally, what is your style, would you say?
Yeah.
And would you say it's an Emirati style, or would you say it's sort of like a mixed bag? So how do you relate to, tell us a little bit about the nationalities that work with you, and how you relate maybe differently to your Emirati team and your expat team.
I think I am a bit influenced by a mix of styles, not only Emirati styles. And when it comes to negotiation, I tend to go more to the practical solutions, to be honest. I won't get stuck into some certain points and stop a deal because of some certain technicalities, but I'm more practical, because what I have seen throughout the years, a lot of cases, a lot of disputes that have been, let's say, tortured by time of this process, and I can see the loss in that situation. So I think it influenced me somehow. It led to this mindset of being practical, move on with some, let's say, disagreements in order to avoid the time aspect.
Right. No, but that's quite practical, and that's something I still don't see in many lawyers. Like sometimes I am on a case, we have one now, where we have a negotiation where someone's trying to reach a settlement with us, but they're being so aggressive in the settlement that we're wasting so much time and effort and client's money, his client's money, because everyone's like fighting. And we're saying, just give us the 5 or 6 points you don't agree in this problem so we can find a way to resolve it.
We can move on, exactly.
But no. They want to labor each and every point, and it's not serving the purpose of any sort.
You know, Jayshree, I think the biggest kind of cases I have seen which have been handled illogically somehow are inheritance cases. You'll be surprised, because with the inheritance you have two problems. You have the business differences between partners, and then you have a bit much of emotional issues between partners, and they are the most dramatic, let's say, kind of. Yeah, to be honest, a very dramatic kind of negotiation, and financially doesn't really make sense. So looking at this kind of cases, you kind of adopt to a different style, which is more practical, you know, and reasonable.
And have you found resistance sometimes with the other side, like I have, when you're trying to be the practical lawyer, you're trying to be commercial, get a great solution. Do you find resistance?
It happens.
Okay, and how do you, what's your style to overcome that?
See, in any case or any negotiation, of course, you need to be ready with what are your moves, what are the point of strength you have in hand, okay? You won't flag them at the very beginning, but you need them to be prepared before even discussing the negotiation meeting, etc. The first step we do is to find out our position, our legal position. That's the basic. And you hope you won't use it, obviously, but if the negotiation doesn't go in the best manner, obviously this should be prepared earlier, you know.
Right. No, I agree with you. Do you find some of your clients are hesitant to take that step to go to court? When a negotiation fails and you're like, okay, now we have to go to arbitration or court, do you find your clients are like, no, we're scared, we don't know?
There is a certain percentage of clients, but the thing is, if you explain very well the process and you put the options on the table, I think it can be easier for the client to give a decision on that.
You also talked about the courts going online, the different court systems that the UAE has put in place, your workforce, you know, your balance. Do you see a big difference between how your father's time ran the law firm and practiced law in the courts, say 10 years ago or 12 years ago versus now?
A huge difference, actually. Yeah, huge difference. I remember very well driving with him to different Emirates, sometimes even to Fujairah court, imagine, for a single hearing. So imagine how much time this will consume. One single hearing, your whole day. Today I can take 10 hearings in one day and still run my business efficiently. So I think there is a big difference in that. Even it's not only the attendance of the hearing, even the applications, the admin applications require that physical visit to the court.
Right.
So I think there's a huge relief today by this solution we are having, but also there is a bigger competition, more requirements from us. So we need to accommodate bigger number of cases compared to the number of cases they used to have. I think it was more relaxed back then to have fewer cases and run it in that manner. You know, it worked at that time, but today I think we are supposed to have a bigger flow of cases. And fortunately, we have the solutions and the tools to accommodate that.
I felt like we worked harder, not smarter.
At that time.
Yeah.
Very true.
And now we work smarter, but maybe not as hard, which means we kind of need to still work harder and smarter.
Not exactly, but today, to be honest with you, I was pulling a draft of an agreement last week for me personally. And it was so easy to do it with the available tools now. I mean, but the thing is, it's not wrong. Why not to use these kind of solutions, okay? And even the outcome and the work itself looks much better than how it did back then, you know? So I don't see an issue with that.
How do you feel about the use of AI?
Okay, so I felt we will jump to this topic directly.
You're completely off topic now, but never mind, this is fun.
Dispute resolution practice is very different.
Yes.
It's very unique. And
Yes.
then there is that personal aspect is always there in dispute resolution because the problem was created by humans and it needs to be solved by humans. I believe so. Okay, and as long as there is humans, they will always create issues and problems. And
as we can see now,
it's always there. It's a behavior, and that's why I feel that the dispute resolution and litigation more specifically is a bit, I would say, different when you think about AI. It will be, maybe AI will support and will help, but up to a certain extent.
Does your firm use AI tools?
I mean, obviously, when you do have this kind of solutions and tools available in your hand, you need to use it, because if you don't, I mean, the competitors will be really beyond.
Yeah, we're testing a lot of different tools with us, and what we find, because we are more corporate, obviously, than litigation, because our practices are complementary, and we find that sometimes we have hallucinations in AI, right?
Yeah.
Because it's trying to tell you cases that don't exist, or it's trying to tell you things you want to hear. It's a great companion because it's always trying to please you, not really giving you the truth. So I'm always warning everybody that you have to be very careful, even if it's integrated AI and bespoke AI. It doesn't mean that it's solving.
It's a solution.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll just point to one thing I remember while studying at the university. We are in a civil law system. We have those codes. We have the law. It's a written law. So everyone was asking me, do you memorize each and every article? In fact, we don't memorize them. There are a lot of articles over there. But the skill we adopted and we were taught to be capable of is how really to understand this code.
Right.
So if you're talking about the AI and these tools you're having today, if they are managed by a lawyer who understands exactly how to benefit out of those tools compared to a non-lawyer who will maybe be misled by them.
Correct.
That's the difference.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent difference. Going back to our negotiation, growing up in an Emirati household, how do you guys handle disagreements?
Yeah.
Do you ever fight? We never see any Emiratis screaming on the streets, so...
Yeah, I think if we're talking about Emiratis, I will take you one step behind as a culture, okay? And I think most of the GCC countries who are on the sea, they do have this unique skill. We've been always open to trading and seeing different kind of people and, accepting different mindsets. And this was historically there with Emiratis, with other countries around the region who are really on the shore, trading and having this kind of exposure toward different kind of peoples. And I think this makes us less unique when it comes to our style of negotiation or our specific, let's say, trends here as Emiratis. We're more international somehow, or open to the international way of negotiating. But we do have some, let's say, special behaviors, I would say. Special behaviors. See, one thing you need to remember that in any disagreement, okay, the respect is very necessary to be maintained between parties, okay? We may disagree on some certain points. You may have a certain point of view. I may have a different point of view. Come, present it openly, respectfully, and do not disrespect my opinion in that negotiation. You are free to disagree with that. It's all right. That's part of the negotiation. But disrespecting my opinion or my point in that negotiation will not really be healthy. I think this is something as Emirati we hold it really close.
No, I think that's quite common for a lot of cultures, but it's how you portray yourself and how you. Can you tell us a little bit about your personal life? Did you grow up with brothers and sisters where you had to negotiate to be the parent's
I was
favorite,
not that in
or
that
your
position.
father's favorite?
I'll tell you a bit about my childhood. I'm the eldest, by the way.
Okay.
I'm the forefront.
Oh, okay.
Let's say. And in this career, the age difference between me and my brother is 9 years.
Okay.
So I can see the gap.
Yes,
and he's a lawyer as well. So I started much earlier. I remember I was even joining my father in business trips back in 2000 and 2001. I was 15, 16 years old. So I think I had a very different beginnings than my brother. So there was no much of negotiations over there. I was the one, I held the responsibility somehow at that time So negotiation was not really a question at that time, but
maybe that's why you're so chill, like, because, you know, I deal
possibly,
with...
and I'll tell you something, when having that sort of partnership, like my role is the management at the time being, and the firm was established by my father, so we are both partners. But we had a shift, an immediate shift. There was no time wherein we both had the management role or some shared decisions, but rather I was taking the responsibility all of a sudden. So there was no negotiation or discussions on how business is run, which is somehow smooth.
But you rose to the challenge. If your father maybe felt you weren't capable of rising to the challenge.
I hope so.
You know, I've seen that in so many family businesses, right?
Yeah. But see, with actual partnership, you will have some negative things and positive things. Obviously, the negative thing would be how really to run this whole organization with two decision makers,
right?
Which wasn't my case. That's the good part, at least.
Yeah.
But the other part is sometimes you would like to have the support of a different decision maker with you, which I think I'm beyond the stage by now.
So you talked about the UAE being so international. You talked about your upbringing, traveling with your parents, your father, understanding the culture, living by the sea, where obviously the UAE always embraced traders coming in. I mean, I remember going behind the BBME bank, the HSBC bank, and hanging out, the boats coming in and buying like seafood and chatting.
When was that?
Yeah, like in 1992, 1993, 94, like all those years.
So you have seen those years?
Yes. I've seen like the change, the growth. Sometimes I felt bad that the city was growing so much because I missed those relationships where you know, you could go to the bank, buy fish, hang out with your bank manager all on the same day, like, you know, and you just had a very sort of like a small city vibe. But now obviously the city grew. All the lawyers used to meet for breakfast. Then we had to be only female lawyers because it became so big. So it changed over a long period of time. So for you as well, obviously walking into a room, you are dealing with so many different nationality clients in the UAE. You're dealing with so many different dynamics. So how do you change your mindset? Like if you come, you know, like this is your country, your tradition. All of us are technically guests here. Of course, you know, we're...
All of you are Emiratis. You haven't seen the signs everywhere,
yes, we are indeed. So how do you cope with adjusting your mindset and dealing with this sort of dynamic?
See, I'll tell you, I mean, the point you started with, it goes much more before the 90s. In fact, even from our grandfather's generation. When I'm talking, I'm saying from that level, they were always used to different kind of people. So when they see a different nationality, different culture, different religion, they're always open to listen and to, you know, to accommodate. You don't have that kind of resistance toward the different between us. And obviously, this was passed through generations, so it's not a new thing for us. And to be honest, here when you're talking about the variety of nationalities and groups, I think it's more relaxed because you don't feel that there is any group who's unique or different, and any group around the city doesn't feel he is different. You know, we are all a mix of people living in harmony somehow. And even as an Emirati, when you feel that, people will not judge you about the background or from where you came, etc. And I think that's more of a relaxed vibe.
So I think what I'm hearing from you is that you're saying the Emirati culture has grown to be very accepting of cultures, mindsets.
It was always like that. It was always like that. Obviously, it was exposed toward a huge development. But I think the roots were there. That's the point I'm trying.
No, that's a great observation because people forget, right? They think everything is now just modern.
Came all of the sudden. No, it wasn't. No. Go back to the history, and you will find out that it was always somehow like that. You know.
I mean, like I told you, my bank example, like everyone spoke to me like in Hindi. Like all the Emiratis spoke, you know, in the Indian languages. So I would be like, oh my gosh, I have no secrets. Like they can understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, it gives you a sense that the people are used to this.
So let's talk about some of the smaller things. Let's talk about body language, like you mentioned, respecting the other person, tones, obviously raising your voice and screaming. I mean, that's not particularly great for any negotiations. How much do you think that matters in a negotiation with an Emirati? So suppose I was going for a negotiation, with a big Emirati company, and I have you in front of me. I hope I never have you on the other side of a negotiation, but how should I behave?
I'll start with one thing. We're not really very sensitive. We're very much accommodating. But some behavior goes beyond the red lines somehow,
Right.
But generally, whatever moves you would consider while dealing with any international partner, would possibly apply on the Emirati partner up to a certain extent, because they are very much open and they know there is differences between different cultures. However, the respect aspect is somehow important. Don't come and intentionally try to disrespect the other party because you have a disagreement with his opinion.
Correct.
If you go up to that extent, then possibly you won't have a good potential to negotiate.
And how is the risk appetite? Like, do you say Emiratis are risk takers? I know you talked about your biking business, so you obviously have an edge, in terms of your personality and all of that. But do you think that they take risks easily, or they measure everything and think through everything?
I would say they are risk takers.
Okay.
Yes, because of a couple of reasons, obviously. See, I think as a country, as nationals, UAE nationals, we do have a certain level of support, which everyone knows, a certain lifestyle, which is always there. And that's why you can feel that the individuals here try to go one step beyond. And this is the reason they are open for risk. They have that safety aspect compared to different cultures. Different cultures, sometimes you can find them that they have insecurity somehow, different places around the world. But that level of comfort, the Emirati nationals are privileging of. I think it allows them to have this appetite to risk. This is one important thing to remember.
Right.
The second thing, the business culture in the UAE generally, the government of the UAE is a risk taker. And this is the reason they achieved all of that success. We are not a very old school classic kind of business or government. We are a forward thinking government. And I think this reflects on all of the individuals here in the UAE.
It's mind-boggling how forward-thinking it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's mind-boggling the kind of decisions that can be made, and decisions can be carried out in such a short span of time.
Yeah. You see, if it was a very conservative decision-taking process, you will never see this success.
No, not this fast, or it would take years and years.
And I think the symbol and this, let's say, trend is Sheikh Mohammed himself. He is the one who obviously calculates the risk, but he would definitely go one step beyond. And otherwise you will just see a basic city.
Yeah. And do you think this process, like the risk-taking process, the decision-making process, is like a one-man process in an Emirati?
Somehow, yes.
Okay.
Somehow,
so you
yes.
need a leader.
You need the leader, because if it was an organization kind of move, it will always be slow. It needs that, let's say, brave individual who pushes the organization one step beyond to achieve that extraordinary result, Jayshree, not the basic kind of growth,
Yeah. And I mean, we've seen a lot of investments come into the UAE, right? In the last, say, 15, 20 years, we've seen a huge change and boom. What would you say are mistakes foreign partners make when they come into the UAE?
Obviously, it's a very attractive market, but also you need to remember that it's a very competitive market, so you need to have what it takes. Being here, doing the move and providing basic services or products, etc., will not really get you up to the point where you're aiming to. You need to put in your mind that yes, you have a lot of support, there is a lot of services, it's a very interesting environment, but you also need to add on some competitive things you're bringing with you.
Sure. And do you have any sort of case that you worked on or experience you've had that brings this kind of problem to light?
Which is negotiation, you mean?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example of mine. I had a case where I had a client coming in from another country wanting to invest in a property transaction here. And basically on paper, it looked like a great deal because my client was coming in with no track record in the UAE. They were joint venturing with a great partner in the UAE. They had, great real estate contacts. They had all the right projects. They had all the money to joint venture in the UAE. But the problem here was that they wanted the UAE partner to do everything super quick. They had zero patience.
Okay.
And they wanted the land demarcation. They wanted the law of their land to apply in the transaction. And, the UAE partner was just getting frustrated because they were feeling like they had a great match and a mix, but they were being steamrolled and pressured into moving at a pace that was not realistic. It was absolutely not realistic.
Well, see, if we will take the UAE environment, I won't say we can compare each company and each organization and to say that this is the uniform of all of the culture around the country.
Yeah.
Because as you can imagine, private businesses are very different from different organizations. There is a different process, probably some bureaucracy in different organizations to be considered. So I don't think it's relevant to put all of the organizations in one basket. Obviously, every organization do have its own culture.
Yeah.
Plus, if it's a private-owned business, that time aspect will be treated differently than other big organizations.
Yeah. So I think my lesson from that transaction was to manage a foreign partner coming into the UAE, to let them know exactly what you said. You need to display that respect.
Yeah.
You need to take the time to get to know your partner.
It depends on the partner.
Yeah.
As I said, if it's a business partner, a small corporate partner, you may expect more timely reaction than the huge organizations.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Moving on to some of your work in the courts and before the judges. When you're in front of a UAE judge, what do you think is the best attitude to display? Of course, respect and everything, but what are, say, the 3 top points that you think about when you want to present a really good case to a UAE judge?
Well, you know very well that our system is a bit different than the common law system. So the time given to present a case in a single hearing is very limited because
short.
it's a written pleading kind of a process. Everything will be submitted to the court in a form of a memorandum. And the verbal discussion with the judge is very minimal. So I think here there is the art of summarizing your point. Okay, since we are not in a position in that particular hearing to openly discuss the whole case and the merits of the case, there could be some particular points which are worth flagging in that particular hearing. Okay, and this is the thing most of the clients they don't realize because it's a different ecosystem, a different legal system here, which relies on the pleadings. And the requirements in that particular hearing will be to discuss a particular point related to the hearing itself. As you know, sometimes we have notifications to be discussed here, sometimes we have involvement of a third party in the case. So that particular point will be raised to the attention of the judge only.
Right.
Summarizing that point, and this is an issue I can see with other lawyers. Sometimes they start the discussion and they start the pleading with talking about relative things, and the judge gets frustrated because
you lose the moment.
You lose the focus. I'll get you to the system and how they operate. It's a different system than the common law system. And hearings are usually done in a way that you can have 30 or 40 cases per day, but they will not be judged in that particular day. Obviously, this case or this file will take multiple hearings, and each hearing will be to serve a certain purpose, not to give a decision on the merits of the case, but in fact, maybe it's an administrative hearing for a certain procedural step in that particular hearing, notifying the other party, listening to witnesses, doing some sort of step in the case, until eventually it reaches to the final stage, which is the judgment stage. So the age of that file will be probably from 3 months to 1 year approximately.
Okay.
So you don't imagine the judge to be aware of the full details of the merits of that particular file in every hearing. So he will be focused on that particular reason of the hearing. If it was witness discussion, he will discuss that witness only. That will be the subject of the argument, of the pleading of the hearing. So I think that summarizing the point and flagging it easily to the court, I think this is the trick.
This is the art.
This is the art. This
Right.
is the art, in fact.
Right.
Yeah.
And could you shed some light on the witness process? Because obviously in a civil law situation, the witness process is quite limited.
Yeah.
So maybe some examples or how the witness process works, or in some cases where you've had that happen.
Yeah, it's more common in the criminal courts, whether it's a financial crime or other kind of crimes. Witnesses are more relevant in that practice. And some points and some questions in the discussion with the witness do reflect on the position of the case itself. And some points are irrespective of the case, you know. And I think this is the important thing. When we are having a witness and this witness is called for a certain purpose, I think as a lawyer, flagging the questions to the court that really makes difference in the merits of the case, this is the art, you know, because in many situations, I see witnesses attending and talking about sometimes irrelative things to the point we try to prove in that particular file. And I think this is the however, it is still a very limited venue. Witnesses are, because it's a system that relies much on written evidence and this kind of proofs and expert
evidence. Yeah. Can you talk about that for a minute? Like sometimes how do you handle or manage experts? Because sometimes on some of the cases that is a little bit of a challenge because you don't get to choose your expert.
Yeah. I mean, choosing the expert is one thing, but I'll talk about the concept of expert and how it works here in the UAE. So as you know, every case has a technical aspect. Probably construction, IT, some sort of technical argument that needs a judgment in that part, in the technical part. And the tribunal and the court tribunal is usually a law or a legal background mix of judges. And they are usually not specialized in that technical kind of argument. So our system allows the court to seek support from a technical expert who is registered in the court list, basically.
Right.
In mostly every industry and every kind of dispute that is raised to the court. So this particular party, the expert, will give a decision in the technical part of the case only. So if I have an argument with you on the percentage of completion of a construction project, okay, and this construction project is there, and an engineer is required to come and pass his opinion to the court that, well, the owner says it's 40%, the contractor says it's 60%, then this guy will give that particular answer to the court, okay? Obviously, his answer is more of a guidance to the judge, okay? The judge has the freedom to accept it or possibly to reject it if parties gave counter opinions that really questions that expert opinion or findings. And eventually it will be reflected in the judgment itself. So the legal part will be implemented by the court. The technical part somehow will be reflected from that expert opinion. So this is how the concept and the idea of the expert mandate generally. Dealing with experts in some situations when it is a very sophisticated technical matter, we usually require support from clients and their technical team.
Right.
Okay, as you can imagine. We manage the expert mission. We know how to deal with the expert, but sometimes you have a very, very technical discussion about the situation of the project. The engineering team needs to be supporting us in that manner, as you know. And then collectively as a team, we can present the best possible way of the case.
Right. I always highlight in our cases that the expert's role is really quite critical.
Yeah.
Because as you said, they cover a very technical aspect of the case.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's challenging because as you said, you need the right technical input to support.
You need the right technical team to support you in that mission.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's good advice. And do you generally advise parties to negotiate settlements? I mean, I know you're a litigation practice, so maybe you don't, but maybe you do.
No, indeed you do. I think it's a
It's the right ethical.
It's not only it's the right practical business decision as well. But we need also to differentiate. Each case is different. Now, when we're talking about inheritance, it's not our main practice area, family law, but we tend to accommodate some family cases because it gets related to their businesses. You know, sometimes you have an owner who passed away, it impacts their businesses, so you need some solutions for their inheritance and how exactly it goes ahead. In those kind of cases, I always recommend negotiating because they are all usually family members.
Yes.
They're usually family members, and escalating the dispute often decreases the value of the assets. You know, sometimes you have running businesses and having dispute for years and losing the management and the decision making of that organization will definitely put you into minus, not plus. And that's where I always recommend negotiating. But in other cases, such as debt collection, sometimes I do not. Because I can see the reasons of this situation and the background of the problem. And I sometimes recommend to take quick actions to secure this debt.
So mitigate the loss and not have them leave the country.
Not every case really requires negotiation.
And that's what we need. We need much more thought process and strategy into all of our cases. So that's pretty insightful. Let me ask you one last question. If you had to give advice to me as a foreign legal consultant walking into my negotiation with an Emirati partner, what is the one piece of advice you would give me? In all of the advice, all of the fantastic advice you've already given us.
See, like I started, we are very reasonable, we accommodate, but the one biggest problem I see, if you go to negotiate, despite the nationality, this is a general advice over here, you're coming to find a solution with me. You're not coming to create a fight, okay?
We hope.
Because I think not every negotiator has this understanding, unfortunately. Do not and never go to the counterparty if you are really trying to find a solution and go and flex your strength and muscles and try to somehow, I won't say blackmail, but some threat to the counterparty, because this is not the way to start a negotiation process. I think this is the no-no, if you are asking me. Going and threatening your counterparty with whatever measures you have in hand, whatever tools you have in hand, if you really want to reach to a settlement, I don't think this is the best way. And unfortunately, I have seen it as a behavior from different parties.
Too many times, right?
Yeah. And in case you don't want a solution, you don't want to negotiate, you feel free to do it. Okay, but if you genuinely want to go there and reach to a solution, I think this is not the smartest way to start a dialogue.
My own feeling is like I like to be over-prepared.
Yeah.
So things may not go my way, but I want to have every single option.
Scenario. Of course. I mean, putting all of these possibilities will give you that flexibility during the meeting. But again, if you started that dialogue in the meeting with that approach, you will never have any of the other option 2 or 3 or 4. You know, this whole negotiation will end up in a dead end. No,
that's very insightful. Thank you very much for all your insights and explaining us the UAE court system as well, which I think a lot of people don't always fully understand the nuances of the UAE court system. So it's really great to have an expert like you.
It's great to see you, and I hope we see you more often.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.